In this episode, Joe Rogan sits down with Bob Lazar to revisit the claims that made him infamous and the newer UFO cases that seem to echo details he says he described decades before they entered the mainstream.
Well, what's really fascinating is, for people that don't know your story, you came up with this story, you talked to George Knapp, and was it 89?
88,
88?
88, 89, somewhere in there, yeah.
So, late 80s, you've essentially told the exact same story all these years. And then, within the last, 9, 10 years, we've started to get all these reports. There was the New York Times story, there was the Go Fast video and the FLIR video, and all these videos that show a craft that's moving the way you described this sport model moving.
Right.
Which kind of freaked a lot of people out with the way it rotated and turned.
It does the belly roll, faces at the bottom towards where it's want to go, and then it takes off, and yeah.
It's exactly how you described all those years ago, which is really fucking crazy.
For decades, the biggest problem with Bob Lazar's story was that almost none of it could be independently checked. He said he had seen a disc-shaped craft, worked on a propulsion system unlike anything publicly known, and watched the vehicle rotate before accelerating in the direction it wanted to travel.
I mean, that's the way it was.
But it's crazy because you had this story way back then, and everybody's like, this guy's just making things up. This is all cockamamie bullshit. And then you see those videos from these fighter jets, and you're like, whoa, wait a minute. It's moving the exact same way he described. It's doing what he described in 1989.
Yeah.
It's time to take a drink. Cheers.
Yeah. Cheers.
Because it's so weird. I can't. I've had so many conversations with people, and one of the things that comes up is, do you think Bob Lazar is telling the truth? And I say, look, I don't know. There's no way I could know, but he doesn't seem like he's lying. I've been around a lot of liars.
Look, nobody can know unless you're there. I'm the biggest skeptic of all. Although if you look at Wikipedia, it says I'm a conspiracy
theorist or something.
Yeah, a conspiracy
I think
theorist.
it says I'm a far-right podcaster.
Yeah, all right.
So.
I mean, yeah, it's crazy.
At the time, those details sounded like science fiction, but that is exactly why Rogan keeps returning to the newer military footage. The significance isn't that a blurry video suddenly proves Lazar worked at S4. It's that some of the behavior later described by military pilots resembles the kind of movement Lazar had been talking about since the late 1980s. And
Shit, I lost my train of thought now.
Well, basically, are you a conspiracy theorist? No, you don't even look at this stuff.
Well, if you have a lie, you have one lie, and it's amazing because you've told the same one for all these years.
It's a pretty detailed lie.
It's also not normal. Like, normally when people lie, they get bored with the same lie, and then they come up with another lie, and then there's some other story. You catch them. Eventually you catch them. There's some cockamamie new thing that they come up with, and it's the type of people that are that deceptive. I mean, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit the standard model of someone.
Well, there are other people involved with it.
Yes,
I mean,
that's also part of the
This
problem.
is for the first time Gene Huff finally is on film, because when I had the test flight information, he was he was the first person I told about that. And, we were all able to go out and see it. And so everybody knew that I wasn't crazy. It was...
And then also all the confirmation that you were being fucked with. That, when you were in the gym, they would show up and open up your locked car doors and open up your trunk and leave it there. So you'd go out there and see it. They'd go to your house when you weren't there.
Yeah, they were even They were even following George Knapp and I mean, all of us, anybody that had anything to do with it at that time.
Yeah,
they were keeping eyes on. It was
not just eyes, but a lot of intimidation tactics, just letting you know that they could touch you.
Yeah. So I've really worked for decades to push this out of my mind, so it's always tough to bring it back, and talk about it. And although it might be funny now, it wasn't funny then at all.
And if that similarity is more than coincidence, The next question becomes much bigger. What exactly did Lazar claim he was working on? According to him, the answer wasn't simply an unusual aircraft. It was a machine built around a propulsion principle that appeared to manipulate gravity itself. Here's how Lazar says he first realized the technology in front of him was unlike anything he understood.
So that was the first time I had seen anything that was weird. It was some time later that I was introduced to my my lab partner, Barry, and we had some of the subcomponents of the craft in the lab, and Barry was very anxious to get a new lab partner, so he was very talkative and couldn't wait to show me different things. And it was in the demonstration of the reactor working where it caught my attention to where this is technology that doesn't even exist. So, I mean, that was the first time I knew that this is really something different.
What was it? What was it? What was it about this reactor that made you think that it didn't exist technologically?
Well, it was I actually have to back up because there were some briefings that I read before that certainly gave me the impression that this was going to be a weird job, but this was the first hands-on thing. This was a small reactor about the size of a hemisphere, about the size of a basketball, on a metal plate, and when it was running, it produced a gravitational field of its own. Now, this is something that we can't do. We can't produce any gravity.
Lazar's reactor story is at the center of his entire account because this is where his claims move from simply seeing a strange object to physically interacting with technology he says should not have existed. He describes a compact device producing what felt like a gravitational effect with no conventional wiring connecting its major components, while the program surrounding it was divided into tightly controlled compartments.
The only way we get gravity is from large quantities of mass. But there's no machine we can have that turns on that makes gravity. Like, you can turn on an electromagnet and it makes a magnetic field. We can't make a gravitational field. Anyway, this device was producing that. And Barry said, almost like he was bragging, go ahead, try and touch the sphere. And I couldn't. It pushed my hands away, just like two like poles of a magnet. So that was...
so like when you take two magnets and you try to press them together and they push against each other?
Yeah, that kind of cushion feeling, but you can't get them together. The closer you put them, the more they push. But
and you felt that physically with
my
your hand?
Yeah. Now there's nothing that does that, and that immediately caught my attention. Going, wow, this is something else.
What was your thought? Like when you felt that, and you knew that there was nothing that you were aware of that could produce this?
Then that connected me to the briefings that I read on the first day at S4. Was that everything that I had read was apparently accurate.
What were you reading?
It was kind of an overview. This project was to back engineer the alien craft. And specifically, it was to try and back engineer and see if we can duplicate the technology with available materials. Now, to do this, they split the project into many different pieces. For several reasons. They do this on all classified projects, so nobody has the complete story, but they compartmentalize everything. Now, we had the power and propulsion system. So what the briefings they gave me were like a 1 or 2 page overview of some of the other projects that were going on, on the craft. The only reason they do that is just in case what you're working on is connected intimately in some way that we don't know of to one of the other projects. You have to know their, their existence. So... again, they have everything from metallurgy to, weapon potential of the craft. And these were all, essentially very short briefings. But mine was just power and propulsion. And it made it very clear that what I read was accurate.
And that detail becomes even more interesting when compared with what military pilots would report years later. In 2004, Navy Commander David Fravor encountered an object whose movements appeared radically different from those of a conventional aircraft. Fravor described the object moving extremely quickly and behaving in ways that raised obvious questions about acceleration and inertia. Lazar doesn't claim Fravor saw the exact craft he says he worked on, but he argues that some form of gravity manipulation could explain how an object might appear to make violent movements without the normal consequences of acceleration for anything inside it. And this is where Rogan connects Lazar's decades-old explanation directly to the Tic Tac encounter.
Or you informed in this about
These, again, were just the small briefings that I read. But, again, I don't really like to talk about those because I don't have any information on them, and it was just, small briefings.
But you told Commander Fravor that what he saw might have been a time dilation and not
well, it could be
propulsion.
because
Yeah.
gravity affects time, space-time. I'm sure you've heard of that. And, what Commander Fravor saw as he was in the F-18 approaching it, he said he described it as a ping-pong ball in a cup and shaking it back and forth. It was moving that fast. Now, obviously, if there's anything inside there, it's going to be battered to hell. But, my point was that, well, one of two things. Either there's a gravitational envelope in there which negates any inertia effects, or you are seeing through a gravity distortion field. So, just like you're looking at a hot highway and you see,
Looks like
an
water.
Optical distortion going through there. Well, the same thing happens in gravity, and the craft may not actually be moving like that. It may just look like it because you can only see it through the field. So it may be making much more gentle moves. I'm not saying that's it, but it has to be one of the two.
And the thing shows up 60 miles away. They noticed it on radar 60 seconds after it left Commander Fravor, but it was at his cap point, which is the next point he was destined to go to, 60 miles away. And in 60 seconds on radar, the same object ends up there.
So it's going a mile a second.
No, I think the radar just picked it up in 60 seconds.
Yeah, it could have been there instantly, but
We don't know.
the cycle time.
Nobody
on the radio
knows.
was 60
That's the whole thing. Is,
So it cycles, like radar cycles? Like
yeah,
sends
it
out a
doesn't.
beam
It doesn't sweep, but
Right,
I mean,
it's like
it
it turn- like-
scans.
yeah,
it's
like
a
that
planar
antenna.
array, so
Okay.
it just it scans around at random places.
that's the Spy one does the really cool. Yeah, it
Right.
doesn't do the whole loop anymore.
Right. The point is though that the craft moved to his next location before he knew where his next location was going to be,
Jesus.
and that's
Documented.
well documented. So that's a pretty shocking piece of information.
What's fascinating to me too is that you were discussing this, the way this reactor worked, and that these things were not really connected.
No, nothing is connected. There's no wiring at all.
That freaks.
That comparison is what gives Lazar's story its modern relevance. His account no longer exists only as an isolated story from Area 51 folklore. It now sits beside military encounters involving objects that trained witnesses say behaved in highly unusual ways. But even if a secret program really had recovered technology this advanced, there would still be another enormous problem. What happens when the scientists studying it simply aren't advanced enough to reproduce it? The next part of the conversation offers one possible answer. Lazar and the others describe a cycle where researchers make whatever progress they can, eventually reach a technological wall, and then put the project away, waiting years for physics, engineering, or material science to advance far enough to make another attempt. But the conversation goes even further. They raise the possibility that some of the most sensitive material could be placed in the hands of private aerospace companies, moving it beyond the normal structure people imagine when they think of a classified government program. If that happened, it could help explain how something this sensitive might remain hidden for decades. Here's what they say.
Anyway, the whole point of this insertion here is just that document kind of validates a lot of this idea Bob just said, that they make a little progress, then they can't go anywhere. They tuck it away, and then they bring it back out 10 years later and start working on it. What is the limiting factor? I think Bob should speak on this, but it's the material science.
Yeah, it's really where physics is. So I can see them doing that. I mean, I didn't have any information on that, but I think what George uncovered is probably accurate. That we try and do what we can. And once we reach a roadblock going, we really can't figure it out, it's just friggin' wait, put the thing away, wait for science to catch up. And, a decade later, let's take the project out again and see, all right, now where can we go?
But there's got to be someone who remains informed, right?
Yeah.
So you've got your scientists like you and Barry. You got your people that you compartmentalize. You got these people working on
Yeah, there has to be some people that know everything.
You've got security, and then someone's going to be on the outside saying, hey, we need people to guard this building. Don't let anybody in for 10 years.
I think a lot of that is private industry, and I think that's how they keep it. Yeah, I think that's how they because the government is just so leaky. I think that's kind of what they're doing.
That's what the document kind of proves. You just articulated that it is in control of private industry.
What private industry? Some aerospace company, something?
I don't know.
Yeah, the admiral wouldn't name it in the conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
And that brings everything back to one of Lazar's most consistent complaints about the program, compartmentalization. In his telling, the secrecy didn't just keep the public from knowing what was happening, it kept the scientists themselves from seeing the full picture. The people studying propulsion weren't freely exchanging information with the teams studying materials, the structure of the craft, or any of its other systems. For Lazar, that created an almost impossible situation. If you were genuinely trying to reverse engineer technology far beyond anything humans had built, understanding one isolated component might not be enough. The materials surrounding the propulsion system could be essential to how it worked. The structure could interact with the field it produced. One team could potentially possess the missing piece, another team desperately needed, but security prevented them from comparing what they knew. Lazar also says something else about the environment stayed with him. The people around the craft seemed almost accustomed to it, and that led him to a disturbing conclusion. Whatever they were studying, he believed it may have already been there for a very long time.
But they actually cut one of the amplifiers out of the craft. So my point is...
This is in the film as well, you could see.
Yeah, but my point is, it's so nonchalant at this point. When they first had it, it had to be at that level. And they became so used to it, so familiar with it, that, to them it just became like another, fighter aircraft or something from another country. So it must have been there a long time, is what my point is. Because, look, as soon as you have something that unique, you don't let it just sit there in a hangar and be exposed to the environment and have security people walking by and people touching it. I mean, it's in an isolated, sealed, secure environment. And they were past that. So I think it had been there for a decade or decades. A long time.
And taken together, none of this independently proves that Bob Lazar worked on an extraterrestrial spacecraft. The military videos don't identify the technology Lazar described. Fravor's encounter doesn't establish that gravity propulsion was involved, and the discussion surrounding private industry remains a claim rather than public confirmation. But that is also why Lazar's story continues to attract attention more than 3 decades after he first told it. Ideas that once sounded almost impossible, the government seriously investigating unexplained craft, military pilots reporting objects with extraordinary flight characteristics, and highly compartmentalized programs examining unusual aerospace technology have become part of a much more serious public conversation. And through all of it, Lazar has continued telling essentially the same story. Maybe he witnessed technology that was exactly what he believed it was.
And these guys were intimately familiar with it, not afraid of it, and knew what was going on.
So they essentially had gotten just completely acclimated to the fact that this craft exists, that it was there, and there had been relatively little progress as far as figuring it out and figuring out what it does and how to recreate it. So it just kind of sat there. And so
I think they were making very little progress. And I think they kept going over the same road again and again, and they probably had other experts there and just didn't. And I think the reason I got hired is because I was a guy out in left field that didn't necessarily follow what was going on. I mean, the biggest distractors in the in you know, to me anyway, in the story, our other scientists, other physicists, well, they would have hired me because I'm the top guy in the field. Yeah, you probably are. But I think they hired plenty of you guys, and you just kept going down the same road and didn't do anything. I think they were looking for somebody that just would have some radical idea and just to push the project forward, because everything had stalled when I got there. And it was, I think they were just in a desperate move to make some progress.
One of the things you talked about in the first podcast that I think is really important is that the only way for science to really progress is that these various scientists have to be able to communicate, and you have to be able to share ideas, and you have to be able to collaborate. But that's not how this was run, because it was so top secret. Everything was compartmentalized. Like, the metallurgists weren't talking to the propulsions people, who weren't talking to, if there were biologics experts. Right. Like, everybody was
super frustrating, because I think I don't remember exactly where that started. Again, it's 40 years ago, but I think it started with the seats. And no, it started with the actual skin of the craft, because everything looked like it was made from the same material. And I wanted some information about the skin, the superstructure of the craft. And they said, no, that's restricted. We need a reason for you to... I just want to see if everything is exactly the same material. And what I call the seats in the craft, I still don't know if they're the seats, but they might be. I think it'd be hilarious if they were actually something else. But I wanted some information on those, and that was restricted information too. There were other groups working on that. So they compartmentalized stuff so much. There was no exchange of information between any groups. I mean, you could submit a written response that your supervisor, in my case Dennis, would have to carry over, and they would have to approve, and you'd get a 2 or 3 line response from the other group. But that's not how science works. Science works on the free exchange of information, and they were just killing themselves with security, and it was really frustrating. It was terribly frustrating.
So
maybe some of what he encountered had another explanation, or maybe later UFO cases simply happened to resemble details he described decades earlier. That question still hasn't been settled. But every time another pilot describes impossible movement, another classified program comes to light, or another discussion turns toward advanced propulsion and extreme compartmentalization, people inevitably return to the same man who was talking about those ideas back in 1989. And that's why, after all these years, the Bob Lazar story still refuses to disappear.
Instantaneous propagation of information through the universe exceeding the speed of light, now measured to over 100,000 times the speed of light.
When the interstellar object 3I Atlas came screaming through our solar system, astronomers expected just another space rock from the void. But this thing started moving like it had a mind of its own, making impossible turns and generating energy patterns that defied every law of physics. Then someone remembered Bob Lazar's wild claims.
Bob Lazar's materials to be extremely convincing.
About alien spacecraft with quantum brains that could navigate using universal information networks. Suddenly, his decades-old testimony about consciousness-controlled UFOs didn't seem so crazy anymore.
And that the spacecraft brain that Bob Lazar he didn't say it was the brain.
Are we witnessing the first confirmed alien technology in our solar system? Did Bob Lazar actually tell the truth about reverse engineering extraterrestrial craft? What shocking secret are scientists hiding about 3I Atlas, the discovery that changed everything? When astronomers first spotted the interstellar visitor 3I Atlas hurtling through our solar system in late 2024, they thought they were looking at just another space rock from beyond our cosmic neighborhood. The initial observations showed what appeared to be a typical asteroid-sized object following a hyperbolic trajectory that would carry it past the sun and back out into the depths of space. But within weeks of its discovery, something extraordinary began happening that would force scientists to completely reconsider everything they thought they knew about visitors from other star systems. The first hint that 3I Atlas wasn't behaving like a normal interstellar object came from routine tracking observations conducted by the Deep Space Network. Instead of following the smooth, predictable path that gravity and orbital mechanics demanded, the object began making tiny but unmistakable course corrections. These weren't the random perturbations caused by outgassing that scientists had seen with previous interstellar visitors. These were precise, deliberate adjustments that suggested something was actively controlling the object's trajectory through our solar system. What made these observations even more remarkable was how closely they matched descriptions that had been circulating in fringe scientific circles for decades. Bob Lazar, a controversial figure who claimed to have worked on reverse engineering alien spacecraft at a secret facility near Area 51, had been describing advanced propulsion and navigation systems that seemed to operate on principles completely foreign to human technology. Most mainstream scientists had dismissed his claims as elaborate fantasy, but the behavior of 3I Atlas was starting to make some researchers wonder if Lazar might have been telling the truth all along. Lazar had always insisted that the craft he worked on possessed some kind of central processing unit that could navigate through space using information sources that exceeded the speed of light. He described systems that could somehow read the underlying structure of the universe itself, comparing their current position to a kind of cosmic map that existed on scales far beyond normal three-dimensional space. For years, these claims seemed to violate everything physicists understood about the fundamental laws of nature. But as 3I Atlas continued its journey through our solar system, displaying navigation capabilities that defied conventional explanation, suddenly Lazar's testimony didn't seem quite so impossible anymore. The turning point came when multiple observatory networks began detecting organized electromagnetic emissions coming from the vicinity of 3I Atlas. These weren't the random radio bursts that sometimes accompany natural space objects. These were structured, patterned signals that showed clear evidence of artificial generation. The implications were staggering. If these observations were correct, humanity was witnessing the first confirmed detection of active alien technology operating within our own solar system. The impossible movements of 3I Atlas. The SOHO spacecraft, which had been monitoring solar activity for over 2 decades, was among the first instruments to detect the unusual energy signatures surrounding 3I Atlas. Unlike normal comets that heat up and release gas in predictable patterns as they approach the Sun, this interstellar visitor was generating its own electromagnetic field that pulsed with clockwork regularity. The emissions weren't random or chaotic like the electromagnetic noise typically associated with space debris or natural phenomena. Instead, they showed a complex rhythmic pattern that resembled nothing so much as a heartbeat or breathing cycle. NASA scientists initially tried to explain these emissions as some kind of previously unknown interaction between the object's composition and the solar wind. But as more data accumulated, it became clear that conventional explanations weren't adequate. The electromagnetic pulses were too regular, too organized, and too powerful to be generated by simple physical processes. The energy output suggested that something inside 3I Atlas was actively generating and controlling these fields, possibly as part of some kind of internal navigation or communication system. Even more disturbing were the gravitational anomalies that began showing up in precision tracking data as 3I Atlas moved deeper into the solar system. When the object passed within the gravitational influence of Jupiter, it should have followed a smooth, curved trajectory determined by the massive planet's gravitational field. Instead, 3I Atlas made a series of sharp, angular turns that seemed to violate the basic principles of orbital mechanics. The object wasn't just being pulled by Jupiter's gravity, it was actively maneuvering around the planet like a ship navigating through dangerous waters. The precision of these maneuvers was what really caught the attention of mission planners and trajectory specialists. Each course correction was executed with mathematical exactness, suggesting that whatever was controlling 3I Atlas possessed incredibly sophisticated knowledge of gravitational fields and orbital dynamics. The object seemed to be able to predict and compensate for gravitational influences hours or even days before encountering them, indicating access to computational capabilities far beyond anything humans had achieved. The Swan Observatory Network, which specializes in tracking near-Earth objects and potential impact threats, recorded even stranger behavior as 3I Atlas moved through the inner solar system. During several documented instances, the object would suddenly cease all acceleration and hang motionless in space for hours at a time, as if it were pausing to analyze its surroundings or receive new instructions. Then, without warning, it would resume movement along a completely different vector, sometimes doubling back on its previous path or making right-angle turns that no natural object could possibly execute. These pause and redirect sequences looked remarkably similar to the operational modes that Bob Lazar had described in his accounts of alien spacecraft technology. According to Lazar, the craft he claimed to have examined could switch between different navigation systems depending on the requirements of their mission. For long-distance interstellar travel, they used one type of propulsion and guidance system, but for precise local maneuvering around planets, asteroids, and other obstacles, they switched to a completely different operational mode that allowed for the kind of precise control that 3I Atlas was demonstrating. Bob Lazar's description of alien navigation technology. Throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s, Bob Lazar provided extraordinarily detailed technical descriptions of the internal components he claimed to have observed inside recovered alien spacecraft during his alleged work at the S4 facility near Area 51. His accounts focused particularly on what he believed was the craft's central navigation and control system, housed within a distinctive dome-shaped structure that occupied the upper portion of the vehicle's interior. According to Lazar, this dome contained what appeared to be the craft's main processing unit, but it wasn't anything like the electronic computers that humans were familiar with. Instead, it seemed to be some kind of hybrid system that combined advanced crystalline components with what might have been organic or biological elements. The entire assembly was arranged in a precise geometric pattern, with amplifying sensors positioned around the perimeter of the dome, all focused toward a central crystal-like structure that seemed to serve as the system's primary processing core. Lazar described how this central crystal would glow and pulse with internal light when the craft's navigation system was active, suggesting that it was processing enormous amounts of information in real time. The surrounding sensors appeared to be collecting data about the craft's position and movement, but not in the way that human navigation systems work. Instead of simply measuring distance, direction, and velocity relative to nearby objects, this system seemed to be reading something much more fundamental about the structure of space itself. The most intriguing aspect of Lazar's description was his belief that this navigation system worked by comparing the craft's current position to some kind of universal coordinate system that existed on scales far beyond normal three-dimensional space. The central processing unit would receive information from the surrounding sensors and somehow correlate this data with what Lazar described as a map of the overall structure of the universe. This would allow the craft to determine not just where it was located in normal space, but where it was positioned relative to the deeper geometric patterns that underlie reality itself. What made this navigation concept particularly fascinating was Lazar's observation that the system couldn't function properly without the direct involvement of the craft's original operators. The beings who built and flew these vehicles seemed to be neurologically integrated into the navigation system through some kind of biological interface. Their consciousness wasn't just controlling the craft like a human pilot controls an airplane. Instead, their minds were somehow directly connected to the processing system, providing the intuitive guidance and decision-making capability that allowed the technology to function at its full potential. This consciousness-based interface explained why attempts to operate the craft using human pilots had been largely unsuccessful, according to Lazar's account. The navigation system required a type of mental processing and spatial awareness that was fundamentally different from human cognition. Without this biological component, the advanced crystalline technology was essentially inert, capable of basic functions, but unable to access the full range of capabilities that made interstellar travel possible. Lazar also described how the craft could switch between different operational modes, depending on the requirements of their mission. For interstellar travel, the navigation system would access what he called the Universal Coordinate Network, allowing for movement across vast distances by somehow manipulating the fundamental structure of space-time itself. But for local maneuvering within a solar system, the craft would switch to a different mode that relied more heavily on conventional physics, while still maintaining the precision and responsiveness that made it superior to human technology. The quantum brain theory. Recent developments in quantum physics and our understanding of information transfer at the subatomic level have provided a theoretical framework that could potentially explain how the navigation system Bob Lazar described might actually work. Scientists have discovered that quantum entanglement allows for correlations between particles that appear to be instantaneous regardless of the distance separating them. These quantum connections have been measured to propagate information at speeds that exceed light by factors of 100,000 or more, effectively making them instantaneous on any practical scale. If the central crystal component that Lazar described was somehow able to access these quantum information networks, it could potentially receive real-time data about conditions throughout the galaxy without having to wait for light-speed communications to cross interstellar distances. This would solve one of the fundamental problems of interstellar navigation, which is the impossibility of getting current information about distant locations using conventional physics. A quantum-based navigation system could maintain constant awareness of gravitational fields, stellar positions, and other navigational reference points across vast regions of space. The regular electromagnetic pulses detected by the SOHO spacecraft around 3II Atlas might represent the operational signature of exactly this kind of quantum processing system. Each pulse could correspond to the navigation system accessing universal information networks, downloading updated positional data, and recalculating optimal trajectories based on current conditions throughout the solar system. The rhythmic nature of these pulses suggests a systematic scanning or communication process, exactly what we might expect from an advanced artificial intelligence managing interstellar flight operations. This quantum brain concept would also explain how 3I Atlas could execute such precise gravitational maneuvers around Jupiter and other massive objects in our solar system. Instead of relying on pre-calculated trajectories that might become inaccurate due to unexpected perturbations or measurement errors, a quantum navigation system could continuously monitor gravitational fields in real time and make instantaneous corrections to maintain optimal flight paths. The system would be constantly aware of the gravitational landscape throughout the solar system, allowing it to navigate through complex multi-body gravitational fields with the precision of a skilled pilot. The consciousness component that Lazar described adds another layer of sophistication to this quantum navigation theory. If advanced alien civilizations have learned to interface biological intelligence directly with quantum processing systems, they could create hybrid navigation computers that combine the computational power of quantum mechanics with the intuitive decision-making capabilities of living minds. Such a system would be capable of not just following pre-programmed flight plans, but of making real-time decisions about mission priorities, target selection, and adaptive responses to unexpected situations. The apparently curious behavior of 3I Atlas during its passage through our solar system supports this theory of conscious quantum navigation. The object didn't just follow an efficient trajectory designed to carry it quickly through the solar system and back out into interstellar space. Instead, it took detours to investigate interesting targets, spent extra time studying certain planets and moons, and seemed to show particular interest in Earth and its technological civilization. This kind of selective attention and adaptive mission planning would be impossible with conventional autopilot systems, but it would be natural for a quantum navigation system enhanced with biological intelligence. How interstellar objects navigate like living beings. The flight patterns exhibited by 3I Atlas throughout its journey across our solar system demonstrate navigation principles that are strikingly similar to how biological organisms move through complex environments. Just as a migrating bird doesn't simply calculate a straight-line path to its destination, but constantly adjusts its route based on wind patterns, weather conditions, and geographical obstacles, 3I Atlas appeared to be continuously adapting its trajectory in response to the gravitational and electromagnetic environment it encountered. This biological approach to navigation represents a fundamental departure from how human spacecraft operate. Our current technology requires extensive pre-flight planning, with trajectories calculated months or years in advance, based on predicted positions of planets and other celestial bodies. Once launched, human spacecraft have limited ability to make major course correction, and any significant changes to the mission plan require extensive analysis and approval from ground control team. The rigid, predetermined nature of human space navigation works adequately for missions within our solar system, where communication delays are measured in minutes or hours, but it would be completely inadequate for interstellar voyages where communication with home base might take years or decades. The adaptive navigation demonstrated by 3I Atlas suggests a much more flexible and responsive approach to space travel. During its passage through the asteroid belt, the object was observed making frequent small course corrections that appeared to be avoiding potential collision hazards that wouldn't be detectable until the last moment. These micro-adjustments required split-second decision-making and precise control of propulsion systems, indicating that the object's navigation system was operating with a level of autonomy and responsiveness that far exceeded anything in human technology. The pause and resume behavior documented by the Swan Observatory Network provides even more compelling evidence for biological-style navigation. On multiple occasions, 3I Atlas would suddenly stop accelerating and maintain a stationary position relative to the Sun for periods lasting several hours. During these pauses, ground-based radio telescopes detected increased electromagnetic activity around the object, suggesting that its navigation system was working harder during these apparent rest periods than during active flight phases. This behavior is remarkably similar to how migratory animals navigate during long-distance journeys. Birds, whales, and other creatures that travel thousands of miles often pause at regular intervals to reassess their position, evaluate environmental conditions ahead of them, and adjust their planned route based on new information. The navigation system that Bob Lazar described, with its quantum sensing capabilities and consciousness-based interface, would be perfectly suited for this kind of adaptive, intelligent navigation through the complex, gravitational, and electromagnetic environment of a solar system. The energy signatures detected around 3I Atlas during these pause sequences showed patterns that resembled brainwave activity in biological organisms. The electromagnetic emissions would build to a crescendo during the first part of each pause, then gradually decrease to a steady baseline level, then surge again just before the object resumed movement. This pattern is consistent with a biological intelligence processing large amounts of sensory information, making decisions about future actions, and then implementing those decisions through technological systems. Most significantly, the route that 3I Atlas ultimately followed through our solar system showed clear evidence of curiosity and selective attention that would be impossible to explain with conventional autopilot systems. The object spent significantly more time investigating the inner planets, particularly Earth and Mars, while largely ignoring the outer gas giants except as gravitational reference points for navigation. This kind of discriminating interest suggests that the navigation system was capable of making value judgments about which targets were worth detailed investigation and which could be safely ignored. the consciousness connection. The most profound and unsettling implication of Bob Lazar's testimony concerns his observations about the role of consciousness in operating advanced alien technology. According to Lazar, the craft he examined couldn't be successfully operated by human pilots because the navigation and control systems required a type of direct mental interface that was fundamentally different from human cognition. The alien operators weren't just controlling their spacecraft like human pilots control airplanes. Instead, their consciousness appeared to be directly integrated into the craft's processing systems, creating a hybrid entity that was part biological intelligence and part technological system. This consciousness-based interface concept helps explain many of the anomalous behaviors observed in 3II Atlas during its passage through our solar system. The object's ability to make real-time decisions about navigation priorities, its apparent curiosity about specific targets, and its sophisticated responses to changing gravitational conditions all suggest that some form of intelligence was actively managing its flight operations. But this wasn't the kind of artificial intelligence that humans have developed, which operates according to pre-programmed rules and algorithms. Instead, it appeared to be a form of genuine conscious awareness that could make intuitive judgments and adapt to unexpected situations. The electromagnetic activity detected around 3I Atlas provides fascinating clues about how this consciousness-based navigation might actually work. The complex patterns of radio emissions showed characteristics that are normally associated with neural activity in biological brains. There were rhythmic oscillations that resembled brain waves, sudden bursts of activity that looked like the firing of large groups of neurons, and longer-term patterns that suggested some kind of memory formation and recall processes. Most intriguingly, the electromagnetic signatures around 3I Atlas showed evidence of what appeared to be communication or coordination between different parts of the object's internal systems. Different regions of the craft would show synchronized electromagnetic activity, as if various subsystems were exchanging information and coordinating their operations. This kind of distributed processing is characteristic of biological neural networks, where different regions of the brain specialize in different cognitive functions, but work together to create unified conscious experience. The timing of these electromagnetic patterns provides additional evidence for conscious control of 3I Atlas. The most intense bursts of neural-like activity occurred just before major course corrections or changes in operational mode, suggesting that the object's consciousness was actively deliberating about navigation decisions and then implementing those decisions through its technological systems. During the extended pause, sequences documented by ground-based observatories, the electromagnetic activity showed patterns that resembled deep concentration or meditation, as if the object's consciousness was focusing intently on processing complex information about its environment. Perhaps most remarkably, there were instances where the electromagnetic emissions from 3I Atlas appeared to respond to observations being made from Earth. On several occasions, when ground-based telescopes were actively tracking the object and analyzing its spectrum, the electromagnetic activity around 3I Atlas would suddenly intensify, almost as if it was aware that it was being watched. This kind of responsive behavior suggests not just consciousness, but consciousness that was aware of and could interact with external observers. Amateur radio operators around the world reported detecting structured signals coming from the direction of 3I Atlas during its closest approach to Earth, though these reports remain unconfirmed by official sources. If accurate, these signals might represent the first recorded attempt at deliberate communication between an interstellar visitor and human civilization. The reported signals showed modulation patterns that were clearly artificial, but didn't match any known human transmission protocol, suggesting they might be attempts by the object's consciousness to establish contact using electromagnetic methods that it hoped humans might be able to detect and recognize. Thanks for watching another episode. While you are still here, make sure to click the video on your screen for more quality content.